Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Maisano. And this evening, I'm here to talk with you about the congressional race in the 5th District. I'm a candidate in this race, and I'd like to explain to you what brought me to become a candidate for Congress. I'm a private contractor, and really, I never wanted to get involved in politics. But this year something changed. I looked at the Senate race with Stephen Lynch and Ed Markey. I participated and I became excited. And it reinvigorated something that I haven't felt in years, and that was hope. Hope for the future, hope for our children, hope for our country. And as I continued pushing for Stephen Lynch and then eventually waiting for the general election to take place, this was a special general election that many of you participated in on June 25th. I looked at who would replace Representative Congressman Markey once he succeeded. And I started to pay a lot of attention to the candidates that were vying for this position for months, actually. They had prepared themselves behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes to run for an office that was yet not available. Because why? Because the people, the voters, had not elected their new senator. And I found this odd that politicians would prepare for something. I wondered if they had a crystal ball. I wondered if they knew something that the average person didn't know. So I looked into this and I started to recognize that there was more to this. It seemed like there was an inside track going on, inside trading. And I decided to carefully examine the candidates who were going to run for Congress in the 5th Congressional District. And once I did this, I became dissatisfied and really unhappy with what I saw, because all of the Democratic candidates were career politicians. And what I was looking for was a regular person that represented me. Somebody that you could look at and say, well, this person understands what's going on in my life. This person understands what's happening to us here in the workforce, in the field, out in the general population. And I truly, in my heart, did not believe that any of the candidates, any of these professional career politicians, understood the people in the 5th District. At that particular point, I spoke to a couple of friends, and they said to me, well, you really should consider running yourself. And I said, well, I'm really not a politician. And what they said is, that's exactly what we need. We need somebody who's not a professional career politician, somebody who's in touch with the people. So today, I'm here, and I would like to bring to you what I've learned, because I have qualified for the ballot on October 15th, 2013, for your seat in Congress. And I am the only non-professional career politician. I am a private sector individual and have been, and I am proud of that for my entire life. I've earned my way. But I must tell you that one of the reasons why I've taken such an interest in politics just recently, it's always been somewhat of a hobby of mine, but recently I've recognized that in this country, and I am first generation here, my dad came from Sicily, and he worked 2 jobs his whole life, and I recognized early that hard work is what makes success in America. So I've worked very hard, but more than anything, I've had opportunities. These opportunities were given to me because I was here in the United States. Because if I had hard work elsewhere, if I had one component without the other, chances are I wouldn't have been even remotely successful. So I'm grateful, and now I wish to participate to pass it forward, because this is important. Opportunity is why many people come to the United States, and many of the immigrants that came here built this nation. And I'm grateful to have been here, to have opportunity placed in front of me, and then hard work. Mixing that together, that equals success. And it's still out there, it's still available, but it needs to be more readily available. Let me go back to the point of what is important when you take a position to run for office. One of the most important things to me is listening. So about 4 weeks ago, I decided to participate. We had to get 2,000 certified signatures, and we got 3,500 in 8 days. It was a very large chore. In fact, to be quite honest, I didn't think we were going to do it. But everybody participated. Anybody that had a couple of hours, maybe a half a day on a Saturday, in those 8 days, a small army of about 40, 50 people went out and got signatures. And they brought back over 3,400 signatures, and we qualified 2,780 at the Secretary of State's office so that we would get on the ballot. Now, at this point, not only am I committed, I'm proud of the work that the average citizen, the average workers, I don't have a political machine. I have basically people who are working as electricians or plumbers or maybe a girl serving food at a restaurant. In Winchester, she got 25 signatures. I was grateful. But I know one thing, they all worked hard, and now it's time for me to work. It's time for me to bring issues forward. Because while I'm out now, the last few weeks, I'm listening. And I think that one of the most important things a representative can do is listen to the people, listen to his constituency, hear what they have to say. And I have such a volume of issues, and I hope to get through them this evening. I hope not to bore you, because some of them may be a little bit boring to some sense, but they're important to someone. And since they're important to them, they're important to me. The Constitution is an issue that a lot of people were talking to me about. I never thought that there were that many people that study governments so much. And they were arguing, saying to me that we ought to have term limits, that these people go into these offices such as, and I have all the greatest respect for Ed Markey, the former representative, but 38 years, Paul, don't you think that's a bit long? And I said, well, it is, but every 2 years, the forefathers, the framers of the Constitution, gave you an opportunity to change those people if you weren't happy. Now, I recognize that, well, sometimes we don't have the availability to run for office, or there aren't enough people that wish to make the sacrifice, and those folks stay in for many years, and they go uncontested, those races. But it shouldn't help or assist you or distract you from voting. Because if you're not happy with a candidate, for instance, and you are using your right to vote, you go there and you cast your ballot and you leave that particular race unaddressed. They call it a blank vote. And sometimes something strange happens. The blank votes overwhelm the votes that the candidate got, and that's a clear message. So when I started talking about the Constitution and then it led into the apathetic voter, I started to wonder why people don't vote. And a lot of folks don't vote because of the simple fact that they feel, well, why bother? They're all the same. We're choosing the lesser of evils. Nobody good runs. Once they get in, they make promises. They don't hold any of their promises sacred. And I have a tendency to agree with most people. Sometimes that does happen. And that's when you use your voting power on the blank vote side. When you send a message and you say, I've been here, I voted, and I didn't vote for anyone simply because I'm not pleased with the selection. So that is, in fact, the vote that counts. They count the blank votes. So one of the things I'd like to do is encourage people to vote, because it's not only your right, but it's a duty. If I go back to when I was a young man, I had to sign up at 18 years of age for the draft. It wasn't voluntary army. Vietnam was actively going, and they were drafting people pretty much right at about 18 and a half. You signed at 18 by law. But what was discouraging for us was we didn't have the right to say whether the war was a good thing or a bad thing, whether we thought we should be at war or not. But yet they would hand us a uniform, a helmet, and a gun, and we could go out and kill or be killed without having the right to say that we want to do this, that the country should be fighting or we should be fighting. Well, fortunately, they passed just about in 1971, I believe it was, a 25th Amendment to say that people who are 18 years of age have the right to vote. And you still have to register, even to this day, for the Selective Service Act. So I think we adjusted some of this, and the Constitution, this is part of our constitutional rights. And I'd like to go backwards for a minute and reflect upon the framers of the Constitution. The forefathers, those farmers or blacksmiths or silversmiths, all of them gave us a beautiful document to work with. It is the core of our nation. It is our republic. It speaks to almost every single part of the government, whether it be the executive branch, the judicial branch, or the legislative branch, which Congress is the legislative branch. But they did something more important than set up the government. They gave us the ability to change the document. And that is incredible. If we feel that as the country grows and changes, that we need to adjust this document, well, then we have a mechanism within it. We can have a convention called by Congress, ratified by 3/5 of the states within the nation, and you can change the Constitution. And that's an important factor, because the nation does grow and it does change. And in fact, we have amended the Constitution, I think it's about 27 times, as most recently as 1993. So, and the Bill of Rights, incidentally, were the first, a set of 12, only 10 were approved. They were the first amendments that were forwarded only a few years after the Constitution was signed. So they knew right away, we might have to change this document, and maybe a couple of 100 years from now, the people that are here will be long gone. These are the fathers, the original signers, said maybe they might want to change it. So the ability to adjust the document is there, and it's great. That's how I, at 18 years old, was able to vote. Now, let's get back to the campaign for Congress. I think I've sort of set the groundwork for you to understand why I'm running. But the biggest thing is what I didn't know I was getting into in the sense of issues. No matter where I go, no matter what city, whether it be Winthrop, Revere, Malden, Medford, this is all in the 5th District, Framingham, Wayland, Weston, Southborough, Holliston, Woburn, we're everywhere talking to people, and I'm listening. And they're talking to me about unemployment and jobs and the bank bailouts and the EBT cards and drug problems and energy and regulations for the EPA and pharmaceuticals. And my gosh, I said, what am I in for here? But little at a time, I started to get it. I started to understand that we have sort of like a mess on our hands right now, because why? Congress is in gridlock. I mean, I said to one fellow, I said, well, we have problems up there. He says, problems? They can't agree on lunch, never mind passing an immigration bill. So I said, you're right. They can't agree on anything. And I think one of the reasons why they can't agree is because they've been there's been such a polarization of people. You know, we talk about this Democrat versus Republican. Now, I'm running under a Democratic ticket. And because the foundations of my beliefs are about the working person. But yet, I'm a lunchbox Democrat. I'm not the type of Democrat that says I'm going to throw money at a problem. That's not what I'm all about. I'm a conservative in the sense that I don't mind addressing a problem, but if we're doing something wrong and we need to stop that program or adjust it, I'm going to get the biggest bang for our buck. And that's what the Republicans are talking about. Sometimes the Republicans have good ideas. So I don't want to paint Congress with a particular blue brush and then a particular red brush for Republicans. We're all Americans. Don't you think we ought to be working together as Americans? Simply because an idea comes forward from the Republican Party doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Might be a good idea for the nation. May be a good idea for this district. I can tell you honestly, not every Democratic idea is a good one. That's why we adjust them. So the balance is there. Unfortunately, my belief is that the Congress has been so polarized that they can't get any business done. Whether it be that the Speaker and the Minority Leader, Pelosi, and John Boehner can't get together, that may be something that we have to deal with. I mean, if I was to go into Congress, those are the two people that I would want to talk to. The Speaker is absolutely one person that I would like to sit down with and say, I'm here to work. I'm not here to fight. So if you want somebody to go to Congress and fight, you should look at the other candidates running, because I'm going to work for you. Fighting is not going to solve anything. Remember, I come from the private sector. And when you're working in the private sector, the last thing you want to do is have disharmony in your business. Because if you have disharmony in your business, you make no profit. And with no profit, you have no business. So the same thing applies to the public sector in our government. If our government has no harmony, then therefore we have no product. And you, the voters, the citizens, are the stockholders in the government. And this is why I'm asking you to vote, because you're going to give either your vote of approval or disapproval. It's your country, it's your government. And if you send a representative to Washington, that's your worker. He or she is working for you. That's what the word public service means. I think we need to insert the word public service more and career politician less. The average person on the street, I have a great deal of respect for, because they get up every day and they put in that 10 or 12-hour day and then go home to their families and work even within their own home. And that's a chore. So the real hero in all of this, to me, is the working person. Now I want to go into the issues, because that's the whole core of the campaign, is issues. I said this in one of our releases, our YouTube releases. We're all about issues. So I have a board in front of me that it goes from student loans to cyber attacks and American jobs, Social Security. I'd like to take something that's near and dear to my heart first, and that's because my father is 92 years old. And according to most statistics, he should have died a long time ago, because he's probably going to bankrupt Social Security. In 1935, though, we made a promise to people that once you got old enough to retire, and that retirement age was at 65, and you weren't able to work like a young person, that when you're 40, obviously you're still doing pretty well. I'm 60, and let me tell you something. It's a little tough. I'm still working, but it's not as easy as it was when I was 50. Well, we made a promise to you. And that promise was that if you worked and we put money aside for you, that money would be there for you. For all of those years, those golden years from 65 on. Now, we've done almost the opposite, where we practically bankrupted the Social Security system. And there's a fear that there won't be any money there for people like myself who in a few years would like to be able to retire. Well, I can assure you of one thing. We're going to keep the promise. I have to tell you that a lot of people are trying to adjust things and say, well, maybe we can do this. We're not going to keep this pay-as-you-go system. We're going to improve it by getting more people to work. Because if you think about it, when we started Social Security, we're in a depression. And then the economy went up and down, but we always had a lot of people contributing. Well, now we have a lot of baby boomers who are retiring. And that means there's more stress on the system on withdrawal than people who are not able to work and have jobs and contribute. So we're in a difficult spot, yes. And one of the things we need to do is get people back to work. That's a very important thing. That was what was basically, I think, the second issue besides Social Security. I came to understand that as much as Social Security was important to people, and I noticed that the people that were concerned about that were probably about my age or a little older. I said, look, we need to get more people working. Because the more people that are working, they're contributing. And as they contribute, we reinforce the Social Security system. Right now, I believe it's 7.5% contribution from the worker, from the employee, and the employer is equal, so it's about 15%. The maximum is about $108,000, and some people say, well, what we should do is we should raise the maximum and keep raising it. Well, I don't know too many people that make 108 that are getting that little bonus after they reach 108,000. I think most of us are somewhere between the $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 range, and if you have two incomes, well, you might be at 100 or 150,000. I think we should leave that 108 there and stop raising the cap, and leave the cap alone, and put more people to work. Now, one of the things that we have to recognize is that a lot of corporations outsource work. And then we have the foreign trade agreements, like NAFTA, that undermines American corporations. So they take advantage of like a NAFTA, whereas the trade agreement allows a corporation that might have been a border corporation, for instance, next to Mexico, in Texas or in California, turn around and not be able to deal with the workers who want to have a few dollars extra in their contract, and turn around and say, look, we're going to move our factory. And they essentially close up shop in California or Texas, the bordering states, and move it over the border into Mexico. Well, those jobs are gone. They're gone forever. So NAFTA was well intended to try to get a trade without tariffs and even trade going back and forth from our neighbors in Mexico and Canada. But it also did a disservice to some of our workers. And no matter what, I'm going to always represent the little guy, the workers, the people that don't have the lobbyists and the huge representations in Washington. That's who I work for, the little guy, the person that says, I voted for you. Can you help me on this? Absolutely. The pharmaceutical lobbyist still has access to any congressional office or even to me. But I'll be looking at that person with a little bit of a slanted eye, because I hold corporations to a higher level of responsibility, especially a corporation that abandons the borders of our nation and abandons our workers. We are not going to abandon our nation. And if a corporation thinks that they're going to catch the ear of Paul Maisano while they're manufacturing a product overseas, I think they're going to have another thing coming. Because the American workers are absolutely incredibly talented. we build anything. We've built cars and we've built buildings, etc. Name it, we can put it together. Computers, rockets that go to the moon, American ingenuity. We're talented people. And corporations need to recognize that we have the biggest buying and purchasing power in the world. And it's one thing to build something outside the nation and say, well, we're going to bring it to America, and we're going to make sure it's better for America. And we love that we're going to have a global economy in some sense. But don't abandon our nation. Don't abandon our workers, because we have to be equal players. So we need to pick up jobs, and that is by bringing manufacturing back. Somebody said to me last week, you realize that we build BMWs in Virginia and ship them overseas? And I said, great. So we can build a German car in the United States, in Virginia, and send it to Europe. If we can do that, we can do anything. The other issue about importing and exporting that came into play, and I know some of these issues are going to be, I'm jumping from one to the other, but there's a common thread that runs from issue to issue to issue. And I hope that you'll follow me as I travel along that thread. Products that are made overseas. You've heard of them. A lot of them come from China, but not necessarily just from China. The toys that had lead paint on them, and our children are being poisoned, that they didn't know, the moms and the dads didn't know they were buying poisoned toys because the Chinese don't have a standard to be held to as the American corporations and manufacturers do. The Chinese also made sheetrock. Well, all of a sudden we've had in Florida and a few southern states where they used all the sheetrock, mold and odors being emitted, and evidently poisons were used, and those homes were condemned. Well, that's not going to be a good thing for us, and we're not going to allow that to continue. I even remember when Venetian blinds, they had these plastic PVC blinds that as the sun hit them, the vinyl deteriorated, and they were made with lead, and they were poisoning the children in the home. So imported products, we're going to have to hold them to the same standards that the American manufacturers have. A standard that protects and keeps the people of this nation safe. Because that's the job of the government, to make sure that foreign products are not going to hurt us and poison us. And that they're held to the same standards that the American manufacturers are held to. No less, no more. Equal and fair. You can't argue with fair. Moving forward, I see that we have, incidentally, student loans. If I don't mention this, my daughter Carly is going to be angry at me. She just graduated from the Massachusetts School of Pharmacy and Medicine and did a wonderful job. She has her degree and no job. I say that with a little bit of a chuckle in my voice because she was angry. She says, Daddy, we spent over $150,000 to get me educated. I would have been better off going to work. And I responded by telling her, I said, Carly, education may be expensive, but ignorance is far more expensive. Therefore, we need to invest in education. We need to help these youngsters get educated, give them reasonable loans and grants, and help their families afford an education, because there are two things that I believe we are entitled to when you're born here in the United States and or come from another country legally, immigrate to the United States and become part of the fabric of this nation. You're entitled to an education and you're entitled to health care. I'm not going to allow anybody to be sick and unhealthy and be devastated because they couldn't afford health care. Now, we're in the process of addressing some of the health care. And the Affordable Health Care Act was one of the huge issues that was out there on the stump that I was being sort of targeted with. What do you think of Obamacare? Well, I think the intent was good, because I was actually a proponent of universal health care, and that wasn't going to fly. But this was at least something in the right direction, to make sure people had insurance, to make sure that people had the ability to get insurance. It's mandatory, yes, but by the same token, it's something that we are entitled to and we have to have. Now let me step backwards for a moment and tell you a little situation that I had in my own family back when my son Joseph was 2.5 years old. My son became sick with cancer, and for the grace of God, he survived. Unfortunately, for years after, it was almost impossible for me to get insurance. Joseph was considered a cancer survivor, but the family was unable to get insurance. The insurance companies quoted me 3 times what my mortgage was for a monthly premium, which is, my mortgage was $900. The premiums were almost $3,000. God forbid if Joseph got sick again, it would have bankrupted my family. That's not what America is all about. We're not going to abandon our children and our families. If somebody gets sick and they have a condition that's existing, they should be able to get insurance. Now, granted, we have some problems with the Affordable Health Care Act, and the Republicans are raising them. I'm just hoping they don't hold the entire budget hostage this October in order to get their point across, because I've heard that they may want to sort of destabilize the entire government simply because of this one issue. I think we can get by that. I think we're better than that. But with regards to health care and the Obamacare Act, the Health Care Act is flawed maybe, and I'll tell you one area that people are telling me it's flawed. There is a provision in there that corporations that employ over 50 people can sort of skirt the insurance issue by having part-time workers. And that means they stay under 30 hours. Well, isn't it interesting how some large corporations now are taking and putting a lot of part-time workers together with 25 or 26 or 27-hour jobs, which is falsely allowing the unemployment level to be reduced, because now we have these people working, but they're working a part-time job. We can't survive off of full-time hours at a reasonable wage, never mind part-time. So we need to sort of tweak that a little bit. So with regards to that, I would have an open ear. With regards to adjustments, not totally removing the Health Care Act, but adjusting it here and there to make it better, I think we could discuss that. Now, that brings me to another issue when you're talking about part-time jobs versus full-time jobs. A part-time job at minimum wage, which is going to give you maybe a couple $100 a week, why would you do that? I mean, yeah, it's all right for a student that's maybe going through school, but can you actually support a family off of minimum wage, $8 or $9 an hour? Think about that. I mean, the Boston area, we know that rents are expensive and food's expensive. Remember the common thread I mentioned? No issue stands by itself. Everything is connected through every issue that the people in this district have been mentioning to me. Every issue. Connect the dots. Minimum wage. We have a minimum wage that you can't survive off of. If 2 people are working at minimum wage, they're in trouble. They're going to have to look for some sort of a program for subsidy. That's how important jobs are. The minimum wage needs to be lifted a little bit, because the foundation of the nation are the wage earners. So they make money. That money goes into circulation, and it gets spent here in the United States. So we are constantly building our economy. But at minimum wage, we're keeping people in poverty. Now, one of the things that people said to me, well, you know, we have a lot of programs, and one of the things that they're doing is they're taking advantage of us. And I said, are you talking about the EBT problem that we most recently had? Are you talking about the cards that people have been selling and misusing? Remember, there's always going to be somebody out there that's going to try to, they say, build a better mousetrap. Well, in my opinion, what we need to do is consider, first of all, with the EBT cards, we need to put the pictures on them. Just as Speaker DeLeo in the House of Representatives here in Massachusetts presented. Why? BJ has, when you go to BJ's, they have your face on there to make sure you're not misrepresenting them to get their club discounts, or many other Costco's, etc. Even some credit cards have pictures on them for security. But yet, every one of the people, the career politicians running in this race, voted against it. Well, let me just say this loud and clear. I'm all for putting pictures on EBT cards. If you want public monies, I want to make sure you're not violating the public trust. I want to make sure you're not selling those cards for drugs, alcohol, or anything else you might want to use it for. And that's important because a misuse of our public funds is a violation. I also mentioned something to one of the people I was speaking with in Arlington, and I said, look, I think we also should have drug testing, random drug testing. You have it if you go to work for Home Depot or any corporation or the MBTA. What's wrong with it? I don't want to support drug habits. And I'm not saying I want to use it to incarcerate you. I'd like to use the result of that test if you're using drugs to help you. To make sure that, you know, you get access to a program so that that disease, which drugs, any abuse, drugs or alcohol, and it's rampant. Let me tell you what I've heard about drug usage. The heroin addiction. The heroin addiction in this nation is incredible because it's a cheap drug. They're moving from crack cocaine or the Oxycontin drug because they're so expensive. They're moving to heroin because it's cheap. And it helps who? It hurts all of us. It helps nobody. It helps the drug dealers. So we have to get serious on drugs. We are losing an entire generation of young people to drugs. We're burying children 22, 18, 26 years old, sons and daughters. They may not be my son or daughter, and I thank God, but it could be. It could be your daughter. And let me tell you what I found out. The drug use, the abuse, it knows no borders. It doesn't matter if you're in Wayland, Weston, Malden, or Winthrop, or downtown in Boston, in a depleted or an area of where there may be less socioeconomic benefits. Drugs know no boundaries. And we have to recognize we need to address this. We need to have programs. We need to identify this problem first. Because how can we deal with a problem? We don't know exactly where it is. So if you're on some sort of a public assistance program, and it can be even housing, Section 8s or subsidized housing, or you live in public housing, I'm a believer that we ought to be able to randomly have a drug test. Not to hurt you, not to prosecute you and incarcerate you, but to help you. To make sure you're getting the services that you need. So that if you do have children, that those children are not in any danger. If I've told you that I've seen and heard of people making drug deals or freebasing coke right in the presence of their children, you'd be outraged. Well, I have seen and heard of this, where they're using and selling drugs, and there's 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds or even children 8, 9 years old on the home front, in the premises. And that's wrong. What are we teaching these children? That this is normal? That this is what America is going to tolerate? We have a serious drug problem. We need to address it. And for the record, let me just tell you, here in Massachusetts, we've decriminalized marijuana use. And I know a lot of people call it a gateway drug. I don't really think it's a gateway drug. I would consider alcohol probably more harmful as a drug or an addiction than cannabis, pot, call it what you wish. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do with the oils of this particular herb that we haven't even investigated. You know, the medical pharmaceutical industry loves giving us chemicals. But some of the best medicines have a derivative of nature, derivative from natural ingredients. It's called Eastern medicine. Now, I know you're saying, well, geez, he just went from one issue to another. I'm connecting all the dots because everything is connected. We could flow from one to the other. And this is not everything. This will be a grand majority. I think we'll run out of time eventually here. But going back to the pharmaceutical companies, they want us on medications because it creates a great revenue stream. They don't want to cure the problem. They want us sick. Because how are they going to make money? I watch some of the older folks that I know, and in the morning when they get up, they got a long package, plastic package that they open up and take a half a dozen pills. In fact, the Mass General Hospital 8 years ago wanted me on 5 different medicines. And I said, well, how long would I have to take these? And the doctor said to me, forever. I didn't choose to do that. I'm still here today, but I'm seen by somebody who gives me Eastern medicine. I take herbs. I take various herbs that are prescribed by her to me to help me with my sugar, my cholesterol, my heart, and blood pressure. So I'm on natural herbs, not on chemicals. You know, we've got a whole different philosophy that we have to recognize with foods and pharmaceuticals. And now we're going to go from medicine to food. Because why? The end result is when you become sick, I hope you're bearing with me because we're trying to squeeze this into about 50 minutes and I wish I had a couple of hours. So we're going to go from medicines, the end result of being sick. Why? How did we get this way? Let's look at what our parents ate. Let's look at how we eat today. Processed foods. Now, my dad, he cooks at 92 years old. I have to tell you, he constantly cooks. And he cooks the same stuff that we had 40 and 50 years ago. Same things. We used to be called peasants because we ate peasant foods. Greens, beans, anything, you know, pastas, obviously I'm Italian, I'm sure you can tell that by now. And we ate these because they were cheap and inexpensive. Little did we know that we were doing something for our health, keeping ourselves healthy. We never had steak, very seldom. We ate fish and poultry. In fact, if a lot of people remember back 30 years ago or so, nobody knew what calamari was, but we had it all the time because it was inexpensive. Now calamari is expensive and tough to get, and everybody loves it. And it's good for you. Not fried, of course. But the bottom line is we need to go back to basics. We need to step backwards 50 years and say, well, all of these things that are in cans, are they good? There's so many various problems when it comes to canned goods. The chemical that they use to line the can can poison you. The Teflon pans that you cook on can give you Teflon flu because if you don't allow that pan to stay under 325 degrees, the Teflon degenerates and goes into your food. You ever look at one of your pans? They call them non-stick. See that it looks like the metal is coming forward? Well, where do you think the Teflon went? We ate it. So we have to recognize that some of the preventative measures, some of the old school things that we did were good. And some of the things that we're doing today need to be looked at real carefully. And the FDA is attempting to do that, but not to the degree that I believe we could. With regards to, and I have to mention this because once again, I was in Wayland and somebody said to me, well, what do you think of GMOs? Well, genetically modified organisms. I'm of the opinion, and this measure failed in California most recently, that we need to label the foods. If it has GMOs inside, and you'll be amazed to find out how many foods are genetically modified. It's the vast majority. If it has it, you're entitled to know it's in there. I want you to be able to see what you're buying for your family, for yourself. And if you're not of that persuasion, you should say, well, I'm not going to buy that because it's labeled, it has GMOs. Now, and it's your choice. I can't protect you. The government is not supposed to protect you for making your personal choices. These are your personal choices. But you have the right to know if something you're eating could do you harm or you don't want to eat that. And therefore, I support labeling everything. Now, I know this is going to raise a terrible argument with chemical companies. But remember one thing, I work for you. If I'm your congressman, I work for the people. I don't work for big corporations. I don't work for oil companies or big gas companies. My job is to make sure that you're getting what you need. The biggest bang for your buck in your tax dollars. We're not going to allow people to abuse our system. We're going to make sure the money you invested in Social Security keeps coming to you. The promises will be kept. Another thing came up, and now we're going to walk through another little portion of the district. Somebody said to me, I was in Woburn, and they said to me, well, what do you think about these cyber attacks? I said, well, we got a problem. Every day, this nation is under attack, cyber attack, whether it be one of our financial institutions, our governments, the military. We're under attack through the computer. Our records, our documents, our Social Security numbers, credit card numbers, they've been breached. You read about it in the newspapers. You see it on the news. Can you do anything about it? Very difficult. You can protect your Social Security number, but it's very difficult to protect all of your documents when there are a lot of companies out there, your banking institutions have them, et cetera. Very difficult. So what I'm of a believer of and what I endorse is let's change up the funding in the military a little bit. Instead of buying bombs and missiles and nuclear weapons, and we'll get to nuclear weapons in a bit, instead of investing the extra $200 or $300 billion that they are trying to invest in the government's defense systems by buying tanks and fighter jets, in arming foreign governments, why don't we invest it right here in the United States in defending our financial institutions, in our businesses, in our people? We need to spend more money against cyber attacks in defense of them. We have the people, we have the technology, and all we have to do is invest in it. I'd like to go into identity theft for a minute. You probably every day try not to give out your Social Security numbers, et cetera. I think eventually, looking forward, what we could do is have some sort of a thumbprint identity, because the thumbprint is very unique for all of us. So even if in the event somebody does steal your identification, maybe what we could do is have, with the computer generation that we have and the technology, what would it be to have a pad so that you put a thumbprint down next to your signature? It would be nothing. So what we're doing is addressing all of these issues for you. What we're trying to do is allow free enterprise, not over-regulate, not cause you to be concerned. We're doing what we can to protect you in all the fronts, because that's our job. Defense is not only at the borderline, but it's also in the technological areas. We got to talk about Social Security and energy. Oh my gosh, I wanted to touch on energy. We needed to really think about what we're doing with energy. I'm a believer, and I did a small piece in Stoneham. You know, we retired the steam engine after about 70 years. The locomotives used to drive the steam engines, the railroads across the country. Even some cars had steam engines. And we use steam engines to drive a lot of industry, water power and steam engines. Well, we retired it when the internal combustion motor came out. And we've been using that for about 100 years. But I think we've got to think about retiring the internal combustion motor too. Probably not within my lifetime. I'm hoping I can live almost as long as my dad. But you know, within the next 30 or 40 years, the internal combustion motor should be retired. We can do this by using more natural gas and transitioning like Europe does, with away from diesel, which is a pollutant, which creates a tremendous amount of pollution, and go into natural gas. So we have an internal combustion motor that actually runs more efficiently on gas. And we can do that. The Europeans now have that. I'm just getting the signal now. I'm down to 2 minutes. So what that means is I have probably listened to another 20 issues, and I'm not going to get to them. But I can guarantee you one thing. I will be out in your community. I will be out throughout the entire district, trying to listen, not to preach to you, but listen to you about what's important to you, what's important to your family, what's important for your future. Whether you're 5 years old, or 50, or 85. A congressman is supposed to represent everyone. And let me assure you, I may be a Democrat for Congress, but when I say everybody, that means also Republicans. I'm not going to be discriminating because you happen to choose to be a little bit more conservative. And I am a conservative, but you might be a little bit more of a conservative than me. I'm still going to listen to you, because we all need to balance our checkbooks. We all need to look at both sides of an issue. But most of all, most importantly, we all need to work together in harmony. And that's what I'm going to do. If you send me to Congress, I'm going to carry your messages. I'm going to carry your issues. Just like Paul Revere carried the warning right here through the streets of Massachusetts to Concord. I'm going to carry your message to Washington. We've had enough of this gridlock. We need to work together. I'm Paul John Maisano, and I'm running for Congress, and I need your vote to get there. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't bore you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you need me, I'm going to be in this district. Just flag me down. Thanks very much.
I think you will make a great congressman for the town of Stoneham and for the district.
Paul Maisano will represent the hard-working class.
Paul's a stand-up person, and he speaks the truth, and he really cares.
Paul would make a great congressman because he's caring and he listens to what the people want.
Nobody else knows what it's like to be in our shoes like Paul. You know, Paul started out as a worker and worked his way up to where he was supposed to be. And that's what he's for. He's for the working guy.
Paul John Maisano for Congress! Paul John Maisano, he is with us!
I'm Paul John Maisano, and I approve this message.